Indigenous leaders say the Queensland Government's indecision over alcohol management in remote areas has left communities in a dangerous limbo. Alcohol bans or restrictions in 19 Indigenous communities have been under official review for more than 6 years. Some community leaders support an overhaul, saying the bans have caused more problems, including alcohol being smuggled into communities, known as sly grogging. But Cape York leader Noel Pearson says the Premier and Deputy Premier have no idea of the impact of reintroducing alcohol, accusing them of failing in their leadership on the issue. Stephanie Smale has this exclusive report.
Wickwoman and Police Liaison Officer Janine Chevethan knows the deadly impact of alcohol abuse. She lives and works in the Cape York community of Aracoon.
I lost my mother due to domestic violence. My mother was brutally bashed by her former partner who came back to Aracoon. It wasn't the perpetrator that is at fault, it's the alcohol, the impact on everyone's life.
Aracoon is one of 19 Indigenous communities in Queensland that have been under so-called alcohol management plans since 2002. Initially, that meant alcohol was banned, but some communities have reintroduced drinking with restrictions, arguing it helps to stop alcohol being smuggled in and toxic homebrew being made. Despite his previous strong opposition to lifting any ban in Aracoon, the Mayor Derek Walpole recently floated the idea of a one-off event where alcohol was allowed. Janine Chevethan was part of the fight against that trial and is against any future introduction of alcohol into her community.
If the alcohol does go ahead, who's going to sit beside every individual, every patron? If 200 patrons go into the tavern and then to have the alcohol, who will be there to supervise and say, hey, did you have something to eat before you came down to drink? I mean, who's going to supervise that?
Queensland's alcohol management plans are currently under review and have been for more than 6 years with no official outcome. Cape York Indigenous leader Noel Pearson blames the Queensland Government for years of confusion over alcohol management.
I don't even know what this review process is. There's too much equivocation from the government. You know, the signals they're sending, they're not good signals. And they're sending them to community leaders, to community members and so on. And it's a kind of hands-off, let the community discuss this, let the community debate this. Well, there's elders on the front line who are begging the state to continue to maintain alcohol management, because going back to the days of alcohol supply is not the way forward.
He argues too many decisions are being made in Brisbane, away from the people who are affected.
I think Minister Trad and the Premier need to undertake to visit a couple of these communities unannounced on a Thursday night and then drive around and have a listen, have a look, see what's going on, see what these grog parties are doing. They really need to see the reality from the point of view of the women, the children, the old men, the sober people, the kids that are trying to get to school the next day. I don't think Trad and Palaszczuk would have any idea of that reality.
The Aracoon Mayor Derek Walpole says he has listened to his community's concerns about alcohol and the Queensland Government should do the same.
He's reviewing it in Brisbane or somewhere. They want to review it, they come into the community and review it. That's all I can say.
Noel Pearson argues there are better ways to stop issues like alcohol smuggling than making booze available again.
They've got to take a stand. You know, you can't just say, oh, well, we're going through these processes and we're having these discussions and it's really good, and I think that's an abrogation of leadership.
What would help stamp out that issue of sly grogging?
Much tougher penalties on the sly grog dealers. You know, there should be an automatic rule that their vehicles are confiscated and sold. You know, until the sly groggers are hit in relation to their business model, we're not going to make headway with the sly grog people.
Other Indigenous leaders agree tougher penalties for selling alcohol illegally are a must, but many argue total alcohol bans just don't work. Michael Yam is the mayor of the Cowan-Yama Aboriginal Council, south of Aracoon on the western coast of Cape York.
There should be a harder penalty to sly grogging and that, but as for staying dry and that, I think that's a no-no because, you know, we're all Australian and that, and, you know, don't paint us all with the same brush, all of us not alcoholics.
He says Kawanyama was a so-called dry community for about 7 years. There's now a club operating from Wednesday to Saturday where locals can buy up to 10 mid-strength beers, one at a time, to drink on site. But Michael Yam argues takeaway beer would be better.
The AMP need to change for the better.
What do you think needs to change?
They should give us the takeaway from, the club, because everyone don't like sitting in the club all the time, People need to go back out bush and that, because they got homeland set up around the countryside, and, nothing better than being out bush. That's normal Australian way.
He's not alone. Leaders in other Indigenous communities, including Doomadgee, Mornington and Palm Island, say they want bans or restrictions lifted too, to fight alcohol smuggling, toxic homebrew and even a rise in illicit drug use. Although the Queensland Government says it's consulted widely with the communities involved, Michael Yam says he's resigned to the fact the final decision about how his community should manage alcohol will be out of his hands.
In the end, it's their call, and that, we can say as much as we want to say and that, but, when they make the decision is already made.
Shouldn't you have a say about your own community, though?
One would think so, and that, but you don't always work that way.
Well, they say that they're talking to communities and that communities are the ones that will make the decisions.
I'd like to see that, and if I see that, I'll be happier.
Queensland's Deputy Premier and Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, Jackie Trad, declined PM's request for an interview. In a statement, a spokeswoman from her department that's leading the review says it's due to be finalised in the coming months. The spokeswoman says no two communities are the same, and that's why outcomes from the review will be decided in partnership with local communities, based on what works best for them.
Stephanie Smale with that report.